Hello, everybody. Welcome into my latest live broadcast. It is Friday, the 21st of June, 2024. The summer solstice, the longest day of the year. The official beginning of summer was yesterday. Here we are. 115 degrees Fahrenheit for today here in Phoenix and triple digits all week long. Still not going to break 115, but we'll match it again. And I'll just try and stay indoors and stay cool. And I hope you're doing the same. Thank you to our friends over at Acronis and, of course, RoboForm for supporting us here on the channel for backup software, imaging, cloning. Be sure and check out Acronis, as well as password management, RoboForm. Both of these companies have been around nearly 2 decades, if not more. I've been using both of these products a decade and a half. I couldn't live without them, and I'm so happy that they've agreed to support us here and offer all of you a 30% discount off their already very reasonable prices for the products that we're talking about. They all have free trials. Decide for yourself. Don't take my word for anything. And if you're not quite sure how they work, just search here on YouTube for RoboForm or Acronis with my name, and you'll see our interviews and walkthroughs that demonstrate these products in action, from download and installation to actual usage. And then you'll wonder how you ever live without them, probably. Today, we're doing another computer build, and it's going to involve the Tower T300 or the Tower 300 from Thermaltake. I've gotten mixed feelings about Thermaltake cases. They don't really seem all that considerate when it comes to cable management or airflow. However, the case is so unique looking and probably very impractical, I thought it would be fun to do. However, there's been a very sharp decline in the interest of computer builds here on YouTube. And well, I will continue to do builds throughout 2024. Internally, I'm thinking we may not see much going forward into 2025 unless the attitude of the culture of the viewers changes. We might be seeing more mini PCs or alternatives, which I don't know what they are yet. But I can tell you that as far as customers ordering PCs or having PCs repaired, since the pandemic, it's recovered a little, but it's just not the same anymore. And like all things, from people that used to fix VCRs or blacksmiths that used to make horseshoes, at some point it runs its course and it's time to move on. I don't know that that's happened, but it's happening. So whether or not that recovers or just continues to fade, I'm going to assume the worst and assume it's going to continue to fade. So for that reason, I'm not going to put a lot of money into this build. I just had that old commercial. I'm not going to pay a lot of money for this muffler. For that reason, the fact that it would be very difficult for me to sell this, I have no particular use for it. I'm doing it for the channel, using funds from the channel. This is a viewer-supported channel, and we're going to make it reasonable. I don't want to cut every corner so that it looks pretty and doesn't perform, but I'm also not going to spend every penny to make a high performer for a computer no one's going to buy, and I don't personally have any use for, and it won't affect the way it looks. And that's ultimately what this is about. So for the parts, I've decided to go in at the bottom of the middle is what I would that's how I would describe the parts. You have your budget line, your entry level, then you have your middle. The middle's very big. Then you have your very narrow top of the line, which is very expensive, depreciates quickly, and there's no value for the money in it. So I went with a returned motherboard from Amazon, and this is the Steel Legend B670M. This is the Steel Legend Wi-Fi. We need to use a micro ATX board. Even though this is a pretty large case, it only holds a micro ATX board. They do have a version, I think the Tower 500 or 600, that's ATX, but it's massive, it's heavy. So hopefully there won't be anything wrong with this board. However, it is from Amazon warehouse, so we have 30 days to return it if there's some reason the person who bought it returned it other than they didn't know what they were buying. They got an upset spouse. Why are you spending the money? Or just didn't know what they were doing, or they had a bad product. So all I've done is I've opened I've taken the board out of the box to examine the CPU socket pins. They look brand new, so I think we'll be okay. We'll get to the rest of the parts here in just a minute, but first, a hello and a thank you to all of you joining me today, including Mike's Unboxing and Reviews, Welcome in, Mike, joining us from England. And Craig Casabona, thank you for the $20 super chat, my friend. 3D Everything, thank you for the $10 super chat. He says, hello, Carey, Mara, and everyone else in the chat. Welcome in. Thank you for joining us. That's Ron Barnish and Daryl Loftus and Rick Lakes and Mark Baggett, Richard DeFries and Arto Resenin and Luke Greenia and Paul Garrett and John Svensson, Bill Garcia and Peter Meyer, Chris Johnson and Bajan Guy, Jonathan saying hello. Oystein joining us from Norway says hello. Good to see you, my friend. David Graham with a $2 super chat says hello. Welcome in, David. Mark Gaines joining us from Northern Ireland with a £10 super chat says hello, Carey and Mara. Welcome in. Brad Ravel says hello, and Chris Johnson and Nick Caffrey with a €5 contribution says hello, Carey and Mara. It's 56 degrees Fahrenheit here in West Cork, Ireland. Gatorade contribution. Well, speaking of that, I was at the grocery store the other day, and there were two drinks I used to for a very short period of time I used to really like. One's called Izzy, IZZE, which I couldn't find, and I kind of forgot about it. Come to realize it's not a flavored sparkling water, so it's not in the water aisle. It's a fruit juice that's carbonated, so it's in the fruit juice aisle. And it used to be in bottles, and now it's in cans. So when I stopped being able to find it, I don't know when it got moved to the juice aisle, years ago, I substituted Clearly Canadian. And I haven't seen Clearly Canadian in years. And the Gatorade, the Coca-Cola, and water's been getting too boring. When it gets this hot, my cravings change. So this is a flavored water. It's been around a long time. I just haven't seen it in a while. And I think the glass bottle might keep it colder in this room where I get so hot. It is super carbonated. Bring it on. I don't think there's any caffeine in that. This is the mountain blackberry flavor. I like that in the cherry or black cherry. Anyway, a little something different for today, and a lot of condensation on that bottle. It's refreshing. I might switch to Gatorade later. It gets a little bit sweet, but what happened to Carey? Who is that person drinking the non-Gatorade, non-Coke? Who knows? Again, thank you to Nick Caffrey for that super chat. There's Old Man 55 saying hello, and Doman 2000, and Bill Holloway, and Anthony Pete. Rick Lates contributes $3, joining us from Minnesota. He says hello. And very quickly, just trying to get through all of our hellos. Arnold Schmidt and Scott and Douglas Burchell, as well as Ron Sprague. I'll say hello. There's Matthew Burden. William Denton with $1.99 in Super Chat. Thank you, William. Dave Stetzel says hello. Elijah 52 Dickens and Patrick Manny. Welcome in, guys. Thank you again for hanging out with me today. So to give you an idea of what the case looks like, let me just go over to the window capture here so I can show you what we're going to be building, because we will not get to the case today. We're just going to prep the motherboard today. On Friday, a week from today, hopefully Mitch will join us, our friend Mitch Morrison, and we'll put the prepped motherboard into the case. So today we're going to put the CPU, RAM, storage, the socket frame. We're going to update the BIOS. We're going to install Windows. We're going to make sure everything works, that we don't have to send this back to Amazon. If all that's okay, then on the following Friday, a week from today, then we'll go ahead and put it in the case with the power supply. But the case that we're looking at is this one right here. This is the Tower 300 in turquoise. Now, at the time, I really wanted the black and yellow. It wasn't available yet. I've had this for a few months. This has been put off for financial reasons. But I've seen a number of YouTube content creators already build in this case, and I've been avoiding watching them because I don't want any spoilers. I want to be surprised and figure things out on my own. I don't want all the little intricacies and the oddness of this case. I know it's pretty odd. I don't want to know too much about it. I'd prefer to discover that on my own and react with my own reaction not borrowing somebody else's or agreeing with them intentionally. So I want it to be pure and an honest reaction, good or bad. There's a little 3.9-inch screen that you can buy that can click down at the bottom. I don't know if you noticed that on the case, but right down here at the bottom, there's an optional screen. It's like $100. And it'll go, well, they don't even show it, huh? Well, it'll go at the very bottom. It can, on this case, it goes on the side, but we're not using this case. But it's the same screen, and Thermaltake makes it work optionally in many different models. See, that's our motherboard. So the other thing that we purchased was a stand, and the stand they kind of briefly show here. And if you look closely, there's a little stand underneath the case so the case can sit horizontal. This is a big, heavy case for a relatively small motherboard and small amount of parts. That's what I don't like about it already. What I do like is its unique look. So this is something that's meant to be shown off, not stuck in a corner on the floor somewhere. The idea that you can set this horizontally with a $30 plastic stand is a nice touch. I don't know why you would consume that much more desk space, but it really depends on how much of a show-off you want to be with regards to your case. So we've ordered that just to show you what that option looks like. If you think it's right for you, that's for you to decide. Now the motherboard, the ASRock B760M, is a Steel Legend Wi-Fi. It's got Wi-Fi built in, micro ATX board. It's only PCIe Gen 4, and I'm going to use a Samsung 980 Pro with a heatsink. Therefore, we're not going to use those two heatsinks you see here on the screen. We're not going to use the one in the middle or the bottom. There's another M.2 that's also Gen 4 over to the right, bottom right of the board, that has no heatsink on it. That's where we're going to put the Samsung 980 Pro. I've also downloaded the latest BIOS onto a flash drive so we don't have to delay the show and me going and getting it, which is a beta BIOS that supposedly returns the Intel values on 13th and 14th gen of power delivery, supposedly back to Intel specs. We're going to use an Intel Core i5-14500 with the stock cooler because I don't want to put a lot of money into this build, and the difference between a 14500 and a 14900 in performance versus dollar, the 14900 is a complete ripoff, or the 900K or KS. The higher up you go, the less you get for your money. So yes, you get more performance, but the dollar per megahertz increases significantly over the 14500. Do the math. I'm looking for value. Now, we've got the contact frame, which I'm going to use only because I have it sitting around. These are completely pointless and worthless. I think they look cool. They're fun to put in for me, but they're pointless because once you put the heatsink on it, you're never going to see it again. And furthermore, they don't really do anything. This is the wrong one. This is the AMD one. We're obviously going to use the, I'll have to fix the link. I apologize for that. We need to use the 1700. I don't know why that's so much more money than the AMD version. That's pretty weird. This one, $11. Hold on, didn't I see one for $8? There we go, that's better, $8. I just had this laying around, so I thought, you know what, let's just get it out of the way. It's all spare parts. I'm in the process of moving some equipment to the new Studio C, as Studio C is under construction, and this is one less thing. I don't want to have to move this or lose it in the move. So if I attach it onto the board, let's just use it, get it out of the way, and when I move the computer over to Studio C, then I'm not moving 8 different parts: the motherboard, the cooler, the CPU, the RAM, the storage. All that's going to be in one case that can be moved. The RAM, we're going to continue to use the OLOY DDR5. It's 2 sticks, 32 gigs each, RGB, because, you know, it's all about the looks. I think we've got the wrong RAM. So when I put these links together, I might have been in too big of a hurry. This is a kit of 32, not 64, because I knew that price was too high. You know, the downside of putting too much RAM in your system is you're going to slow your boot time down significantly. Some people think, hey, I want to go to 128 gigs of RAM. Well, I hope you're not in a hurry when you turn your system on, because your BIOS has to check all that RAM, and you're going to slow your boot up time by 5 to 10 times longer. It'll be quite noticeable. But then once Windows runs, if you're somebody who uses a lot of resources, then that should help you. But if you're not using a lot of resources, you'll see no benefit. And I recommend most people don't go higher than 32 gigs of RAM unless you want to slow down your computer's startup significantly. You don't believe me? Try it. More is not always better. Let's just take a quick look here for 32 gigs. This looks more like it. 6,000 speed. That price is much more reasonable. I'm sure that's actually what we've got here. Another link we need to correct later. This is the Samsung 980 Pro. I happen to have one of these left over. I don't know that if I was looking to build cheap, I would go with the Samsung Drive, but because it was already in inventory, and as I've already explained, one little box less I have to move. And then for the power supply, I just happen to have a couple of these EVGA 650s. It has a turquoise bottom, which will match the turquoise case that nobody's ever going to see. But regardless, I've got it laying around in inventory. So again, trying to keep the price as cheap as possible. Most of these parts I've already had in inventory. I bought the board and the CPU. So that's why we're using these parts today, in case you were wondering. And let me go back over to camera one. Here I am. And let me jump back over to my chat room as well. Now, does anybody have any questions about the part selection or what we're doing today or why? Paul Garrett said his system has 128 gigs of RAM on a 13700 Intel CPU. It takes over 1 minute to boot. See, this is what I'm talking about. You could have a system that's a Core i9, a 9th generation Core i5 that boots in 15 seconds if you only have 8 or 16 gigs of RAM. The more RAM you add, the longer your system is going to take to post. It's not always good. People make their systems worse. They spend money they don't need to spend to add RAM they're never going to use just because more. And look, if you're that simple, if your logic, if the amount of money in your wallet is more than the amount of money, than the amount that you care about how much value you're getting back for the money, I'm not telling you how to spend your money. I'm saying I would not do that. And other YouTube channels, because they're not real technicians, they're just enthusiasts for the most part. If they're a real technician, or if they're a much more knowledgeable enthusiast, then they would tell you this information. They would have been telling it to you for the last 10 plus years, and they aren't telling you this. At least I've yet to hear anybody talk about it. So I'm trying to bring something unique to my channel, a perspective from the industry. And if I did this to a customer and charged them for it, and their system booted slower, I'd be getting a support call. I'd be told, take this back out. You've ruined my computer. I want a refund, and you're going to do the work for free. I can't stay in business with that. I want customers coming back and ordering more systems. I will often talk a customer out of adding more RAM, and I will warn them. And if they still want to do it, we'll do it. But I want them to hear me out. This makes me a terrible businessman, because on the business side of things, it's sell, sell, sell. It's not my problem if the customer wants to waste their money. I'm not holding a gun to their head saying you have to buy it. I'm not pressuring them. Wasn't my idea. So I'm going to take their money. That's the attitude of most businesses. I don't run my business that way. As a result, I'm fairly confident I will never become wealthy. I'm too honest. But I'd rather be too honest and sleep well at night than to perform the same kind of lack of morals and ethics that I see in the enthusiast community and that I see in the business community. I'm trying to find a line down the middle where I've got a foot on each side. And from my perspective, I don't see too many people doing that. So if you see value in that, well, you've come to the right place. I guess that's all I'm trying to say. I'm trying to be practical, and I'm trying to be morally and ethically treating people the way that I want to be treated, right? I mean, go buy a house and watch the way you're treated. Go buy a car and watch the way a car salesman treats you. I get offended by that. Like, you would think I'm stupid. The way that a lot of people approach sales is offensive to me. It's like a personal attack that I'm too dumb. And that may be their intent, but that's how I interpret it. And I don't want to treat anybody that way because I don't want to be treated that way. And that's why it's so important to me, in case you're wondering. Who cares? It's other people's money. What do you care? I do care. Maybe my mom should not have named me Carey. Maybe she should have named me Maximilian, and then maybe I'd be a millionaire. I mean, I had a teacher named Mr. Smart. So, and what was the guy? The guy wasn't Wikipedia. There's a website that shares knowledge, and I think that gentleman's name was also Smart. Or anyway, it's kind of interesting how some people align with their names. So, yeah, maybe Maximilian. I could find a way to blame my parents for my financials. Why not? That's the end thing to do. All right, let's see. Barry Clyde says hello. There's Thomas Backenstow joining us. Welcome in, guys. Let's see. David Graham contributes $5. He says, I just paid my taxes today and just have enough sense left to pay attention. Nice. Thank you for that. El Haj joins us. Zach Bischoff joins us. Let's see if I missed any questions here. William Denton with $1.99. Thank you, William. Rick Lakes with $3. Thank you, Rick. George Ferrugia says hello. Tim Techwiz says hello. Gerald Wallace says hello. Chris Johnson said he's got 32 gigs of RAM in his system. It boots within 20 seconds. Yeah, it's really noticeable at 64. And then when you double that again to 128, adding another 64, it doubles it again in length. And then when you go from 128 to 256, you're going to be sitting a while before your system boots. So just be prepared for that. Don't be surprised. And if you're okay with that, chop away. Otherwise, save your money, buy something more useful that you would benefit from. Nick Caffrey said, you've used Team Group RAM earlier. I'm using it happily. Is the OLOY superior in any way? I don't know yet. I've not used enough of the OLOY to know if it's superior in any way. I bought it because of price and availability. Same with Team Group. I don't intentionally go after these particular brands. What I'm looking for on certain builds is something that is of quality, but not a very well-known brand, in order to get the best price. So you're not going to see a lot of Corsair or G-Skill because they cost more, unless that build requires it. So OLLY was offering me the RGB with the heatsink at the speed I wanted, with the amount of RAM I wanted, with the warranty I wanted, at the price I wanted. And comparably, Team Group wasn't in the running. Either the product wasn't in stock, it wasn't available, the color wasn't right, or it was more money. So there's no loyalty to any brand. I just want to stick with something reputable, but it doesn't have to be a household name. Now, if we're building something to be top shelf, it's a different story. This is about building it as cheaply as I can while still remaining within my minimal standards of quality. Or in the case of a name brand SSD with a heatsink, I normally wouldn't spend extra for a heatsink when the board already has heatsinks. I would have happily used a Fangjing 1 terabyte drive that's significantly less than this. But I already had this in inventory. It's been sitting on the shelf for months. It's a good excuse to use it. But yeah, don't read into anything about that. I'm not avoiding a particular brand that you've seen me use before unless I have outwardly said as much. And I will usually repeat it numerous times throughout numerous videos just to remind people who might have missed it earlier. So this is just about price, availability, color, the features that I wanted from a brand that is respectable and not just something off AliExpress or some fly-by-night company that may not offer any support down the road. You might be getting a good deal today. I've seen people try and shave a few dollars off their purchases by getting used product, by buying direct from a manufacturer. But what a lot of people are not absorbing is when you're buying a brand new product and you're paying less, you're getting a product that's worth less. You're getting less. So if you have the if you have the option, let's take these mini PCs. And we always show you, you can buy directly from the mini PC manufacturer or you can buy from Amazon. If you buy from Amazon, you're going to get it faster and you've got a 30-day return period. But it might cost you a few dollars more. If you order direct from the manufacturer, it might take a couple weeks to arrive if it's shipping from the manufacturer's country. You might save some money. They probably have a return, but I don't know how that works because you're going importing and exporting versus Amazon. But if the manufacturer is going to save you $10, so you want to save the $10, then understand that if you need to return it or when you're waiting to receive it, you're paying $10 less for that inconvenience. That doesn't make the machine worth what Amazon's selling it for because those particular things are not something you can resell. So if you bought something brand new for $200 and other places sell it for $225, you didn't save $25. That device is only worth what you paid for it when it's new. This isn't the Antiques Roadshow where you're getting a gem of a deal that you can turn around and flip. There's not enough money in it for anybody that you go ahead and try and resell it at what you paid for it. The day you get it, good luck. So understand that when you pay less, you get less. And whatever you're buying that's brand new, that's what it's worth at the time you bought it. If you paid less, it's worth less. Even if it's the same thing being sold from two different sources at two different prices, at least in the case of, say, Amazon versus the manufacturer. So don't, when you're shopping and you're making that decision, please make an informed decision that you're okay with the choices you're making, the pros and the cons. Not all one side is shiny without side effects, and not the other side is shiny without side effects. So which would you rather have? Would you rather have the product sooner with an easy return policy and pay a little bit more, or would you save the $10, order directly from the manufacturer, and then wait 2 or 3 weeks for the product to arrive? And if you have a problem, have to learn what the return process is. I mean, my answer to that, I think you all know, but that doesn't mean choosing one over the other is right or wrong. It's just that a lot of people don't understand anything more than the dollar value, and they don't comprehend the convenience of the speed of shipping and return with Amazon and why that's worth a few dollars more, in my opinion. Okay, so with that out of the way, Tim TechWiz with a $2 super chat. Thank you, Tim. Luke Greenia says you might want to check your phone before you get started. Thank you for the reminder, Luke. Good to see you, my friend, there, joining us from Vermont. And yes, $25 from Luke Greenia. Right on. Well, thank you so much, as always, Luke. He says, stay cool, my friend. Absolutely loving the Project Zero build. Nice. Well, we appreciate you supporting the channel and purchasing that. And we were a little scared in how it arrived. The CPU fan came off with a spindle of the heatsink. It was an AMD stock fan. Luckily, it didn't damage anything, and Luke was able to push the fan back onto the spindle and it clicked back in. That's a new one. And that was a very expensive item to ship. Thankfully, that's all that happened, but given it was double boxed and double packed, I don't know how much better it could have been other than putting some kind of foam inside of the computer, which I don't do. So the whole thing of shipping computers, we're not doing that anymore. It's just too expensive, and they're getting more and more careless and charging more and more money. Deliveries are not showing up on time. They're arriving late. And the only one making any money is the delivery company. So enough of that. Another reason to shift away from these builds. Still sell them locally, that's not a problem. But given that most of our viewers are on the East Coast, in fact, 2/3 of the United States population lives east, the bulks of sales that I have for shipping all go to East Coast primarily. Very expensive. The further away it is, the more likely damage is and the more expensive it is. So again, the only one happy in that scenario is the delivery company. Ben Laird with a £2 super chat. Ben joins us from Scotland. Thank you, Ben. A shout out to our friend Buster out there in Scotland. And thank you, as always, for your continued support, your friendship, and just a shining example of the kindness and generosity of the community. Can't thank him enough. But I thank all of you, just especially Buster, and of course our friends Frankie B and Oystein for their extraordinary generosity. All right, so I guess I don't see any other questions about the build, and we can start prepping the board. I did charge my overhead camera here, so we should be good with that. The keyword being should. Tim says it was a super sticker. I didn't see any super sticker here. Oh, I see. So on my tablet, the chat displays a little differently. Very cool. Thank you for that. Rezwan says, I followed you and bought a $320 HyperX 128 gig DDR4 from Amazon Warehouse for 180 bucks. It's working great, and I've had it for over 3 months. Mike's Unboxing Reviews and How-To says hello. Welcome into Mike's Unboxing. Man, it's hot in here. I might have to turn the ceiling fan on. Holy cow. Okay, so let me just get some things prepped here. So there's our CPU. There's our SSD. There's our RAM. Everything is brand new, unopened, unused. So if anything is dead on arrival or there's any issues with any of these parts, you're going to find out at the same time I do. These videos are live, unrehearsed, and unscripted. Because in real life, when you're sent out to a customer's location to fix their computer, there's no script. The customer's often watching you work. And a lot of what you work on as a field service technician, unless you're working for a corporation that has a bunch of standardized equipment, when you work on whatever rolls in, you've got to think on your feet. I've realized the benefit a lot of you think, oh, you just Google it. In the 1980s and the 1990s, earlier 1990s, we didn't have Google. We actually had to use our head. So I'm very proud of the fact that I can think through these things and understand and reverse engineer how they go together in most cases and be able to come up with a solution on my own rather than being told what the solution is or having somebody who has no idea what they're talking about online give me a completely wrong answer for what the solution is, wasting my time and making me look like a fool in front of the customer. I don't need anybody's help to do that. I can do that on my own. So I would rather, if I screw up, it was my fault and not Google's, and it would be my fault to trust Google. So given a choice of Googling something or figuring it out on my own, again, I'm a Gen X 1980s feral child. We figured stuff out on our own. We learned the hard way. That's my favorite way to learn. It may not be yours. You might just want to cut every corner. You don't care about the experience. You just want to get it done. Hey, man, you got more time on your hands than I do. Because I can assure you, having done both ways, my way is faster and more consistent from my perspective, and you will never talk me out of my experience. What happens to me that I experience is real, no matter if you agree with it or not. I don't necessarily agree with my experience, but I can't deny the experience. And the scale of my work and the number of machines I've worked on in over 30 years has led me to this conclusion that no words can debate experience. You can't tell me, you can't put your foot on my head and hold me underwater and tell me I'm not going to drown. You can say it, but it doesn't change the reality. You can use all the words you want. Believe me, I have experimented with this. Let me give you an example. I'm a millionaire. I'm a millionaire. I'm a millionaire. Nothing happened. I'm still not a millionaire. So you can sit there and delude yourself with words and whatever you choose to believe, or you can join the rest of us here in reality. You can choose either way. I'm okay with it. My preference is to stay in reality. If I want to be a millionaire, then I need to work to that goal. Sitting there and just convincing it myself is preposterous. It's delusional. And reality is delusion enough. Okay. All right. Just a little philosophy in there for you. Now, clearly this has been opened before because the bag's all wrinkled. You'll know when you get a new product. At least I will, because the bag won't have any wrinkles on it. The box seems to be torn. Okay, there's our two antennas, SATA cables, foam, Velcro cable management. And somebody has ripped the edges off of this for some reason. We don't need that. I mean, unless the board's going to go back, in which case I'll put everything back in the box. That can go in there for now. And we'll bring up the motherboard, and I can go over there. Oh, that's interesting. They put a Wi-Fi, a laptop Wi-Fi card. That's how they're getting Wi-Fi on this. Interesting. I've always seen that as an option that you can add. I've never seen that added from the factory before. You think they would have just put a Wi-Fi chip on the board and soldered it down? In this way, you've got a standard laptop Wi-Fi card that's upgradable, replaceable, but you also have the two little antenna wires to clip on that are very, very tiny and can be difficult, especially if you have larger hands or you don't have good dexterity. But if you wanted to upgrade to Wi-Fi 9 or Wi-Fi 10, you could certainly do that. With most boards like this that have built-in Wi-Fi, it's often a soldered-on chip. And what you would do to upgrade it is you would disable that in the BIOS and just add a USB or PCIe card into the board for the upgraded Wi-Fi years from now. Super 33 says, who remembers upgrading to a 5800 baud modem? I'm sure that's a typo because there's no such thing. I started with a 300 baud modem, then 1200, then 2400, and then it went to 9600. Then from 9600, you went to 19,200, then 33,600, and then what we called 56K, which really wasn't 56K. FCC limited to 53,333 here in the United States, and it was only receiving, you couldn't send. Anyway, don't get me down that path. But anyway, let's see. Scrolling. Jason Willis says 14.4K baud. 14.4 sounds familiar. Okay, let me get the overhead camera hooked up, which is what I was doing before I see these like errors. I don't know if they're typographical or just bad memory, but what the hell's a 5800 baud modem? I suppose it's like downloading more RAM. I don't know. Let's go over to my overhead. Let's see, how do I want to do this? I can't reach it. I got to lower it a little bit. Down about there ought to be good. I'm surprised it's still not in the camera shot. And let me get this rotated a little bit here. So, and let's see how close I am. We're going to go to the close-up camera. Hey, not too bad for shooting blind. Okay, so if we look closely, there's the little Wi-Fi card I've been talking about with the antennas over here, and there's just a little like M.2 screw that holds that in. This is the M.2 slot we're going to be using. These two already have heat sinks, so don't waste your money on buying an M.2 with a heatsink. These are going to match the aesthetic of the board, and these actually work much better. Heatsinks that come with the board are more effective than heatsinks that come with an M.2 drive. So if you have the option, always choose the one for the board. It not only looks better, it will perform better. There might be some exceptions to that, but that's been my experience. I have not personally experienced any exception to that, though I don't deny the possibility could exist. I use quality boards. I'm not using something off AliExpress or something used off of Facebook or eBay. So when I'm speaking in terms of reliability and cooling, understand it's under these circumstances that I work within in order to stay in business. There's the end of our just drop it, Carey. It's fine. It'll be fine. Wash that off in the sink. 5-second rule. All right, so there's our Wi-Fi, DisplayPort, HDMI. I don't know why a PS2, but if you have a PS2 keyboard or mouse, you can use that. We've got a couple USBs, more USBs, more USBs, more USBs, and Ethernet, and our audio jacks right there. I was checking to see if we had any plastic. Looks like it's been removed. And sometimes there's plastic on this part here. Yep. And sometimes there's plastic on the heat sinks, which can get melty and smelly if they get hot. Let's bring this up a little bit back here. And yeah. What to do first? Suppose I'm going to go ahead and put that NVMe drive in because that'll be really easy. I'll do the easy thing first, make me feel like I'm getting some progress here. There's our drive, documentation. We'll go in the motherboard box, and we're done with that. I've got 2 screws already in the standoff. I appreciate that. And we'll pop this bad boy in. Oh, look, I've cut my hand. All right. Once I get this installed, I'm going to... Okay, I'm not going to install it there. Turns out, that's only 60 millimeter. That is not going to fit. Well, see, this is why we do it live. These are the real problems people can encounter. I don't want to waste that heatsink. I don't want to take it off. So I think what I'm going to do is I'll put this back in the box. We'll save it for a future build. I'll put this screw back, trying not to show my bloodied finger, because that's disgusting. Then I am going to go wash that and put a Band-Aid on it real quick. But in the meantime, let's just zoom in on this board a little bit and let you get a nice close look while I'm sitting still. In other words, I'll be walking away here for a minute. And then I will grab a Feijing drive and we'll place it here instead. So, see, I thought I was going to be making progress and turned out the opposite. This is why we do it live and unscripted. This is the way real life is. So I think I cut my finger on the box. It's not from the blade. You'd think, oh, it's the blade. No, no. Pretty sure I caught a piece of the edge of the cardboard on my finger there. All right, Feijing. This is what I think we want to use. Do I have one opened already? I think I do. Again, I'm trying to keep the price down on this, so if I can use a product that's sitting here that was upgraded or replaced for some reason. These all look like Gen 3 drives that I have used, so I guess I'm using a new one. All right, let's jump back over to camera one here, real quick. David Graham with $2 super chat says for your Band-Aid supply. That's nowhere near enough. It didn't hurt. I didn't even realize. I saw it. I didn't feel it. So, all right. So I've got the Feijing. This is the S880. There's the third link we're going to have to change in our video notes. I've got the wrong contact frame. For some reason, I used the AMD link. I should have been using the Intel link. I've got the wrong RAM. They selected 64 gig instead of 32. And we're not going to use the Samsung 980 anymore because it won't fit there. We're going to use the Feijing S880. I've got about 15 or 18 of these in use. None of them have failed so far, so I think they're a good value. They are holding up very well. Nick Capri says Studio C is taking its toll. Oh, it's going to get worse. And a long way to go. All right, let's take a look here. The greater the sacrifice, the greater the reward. Everybody wants instant gratification these days. And, you know, sometimes you got to experience a little pain to experience a little pleasure. It's hopefully there's a balance in there and it's not all. I mean, if everything was pleasure all the time, you wouldn't appreciate it anymore. If there was never any night and it was only daytime, you wouldn't know what night was. So it's good to have a bit of balance in life without extremes. Just let the pendulum swing. Don't let it stay to one side or go too far. All right, here we go. There's our Feijing M.2. There's how it's packaged. It includes a little M.2 screw and screwdriver. And again, I want to use the slot closest to the top of the CPU. That's my personal preference. We'll go back over to the overhead cam now. That is my chat room. Let's try this again. There it is. All right, so to go here, I need to remove this heatsink. Feijing and Ficwatt drives are my first choices for value builds. They're actually pretty decent drives. I think I bought some Ficwatt drives, but they're still new in a box. I was going to use them in a QNAP NAS as SSD cache drives and then realized YouTube videos and large files don't really benefit from SSD cache. I think I still have those drives over here. Speaking of the devil. Yeah, so I had bought 2 of these because they were very inexpensive, but I've not used them yet. I don't think I'm going to use them as SSD caching drives in the QNAP. So these will probably end up in PC builds. But it's good to hear because I'd never heard of them, and these are the only 2 I have, and thought I would evaluate them before deciding if I were going to buy any more. So hearing from you that you think these are good drives, well, that reassures some of my anxiety. Be good to have a backup to Feijing in that value range. And the performance of the Feijing drives is very, very good. It rivals Samsung all day in performance, at least on Gen 4. So I think I am very confused here. They put all of these screws at the 60 millimeter. Okay, so an M.2 drive, it's called a 2280 because it's 22 millimeters wide, 80 millimeters long. 90% of the SSDs that you see available on Amazon and Newegg are going to be 2280. But they do make them at 60 millimeters long. That'd be a 2260. They make them at 42 millimeters. Those are a little kind of square. They look a little closer to a Wi-Fi card. And then they make 120s that'll come out. I've never seen a 120. No, I've seen one 120 in my life. I think it was on the MSO one from Minis Forum, and it's not a typical NVMe. It's like some kind of SAS drive. I may not be remembering this right. So I'm a little worried that little standoff right there could ground up against the bottom But we have a sticker down here with no exposed electronics, and that does sit a bit lower, just maybe a millimeter lower so that they don't actually touch. Now I could get my little 5mm socket and take that standoff off, but I'm never going to use that. Unless it doesn't unscrew. Sometimes they solder these things down to the board. No, that one unscrews. I have twisted these and they just break off because they were welded down or like soldered down. I'm glad to see that that's just a regular screw. I don't know anybody that's using a 2260. I'll put this in a little Ziploc bag and include it in the motherboard box, but I can't imagine that's ever going to get used. And again, with that little rubber piece standing up there, I doubt I'm really solving or preventing anything. It's more of an OCD situation. And then the little screw that I took out can go right back in there because we want to keep these two things together. And again, I could have just left it there, but I just feel better. I don't think it's ever going to get used. So we'll put it in a Ziploc and put it back in the motherboard box. We'll take the protective tape. Whoever bought this and returned it never even apparently put an SSD in here. So I'm going to guess they ordered the wrong thing or got in trouble from their spouse that they spent some money they weren't supposed to spend. Which is a good sign. That means the board's probably never even been turned on. That also explains why the CPU socket looks good to me, because they probably never put a CPU into it. There's usually, from an average user, some damage to the socket because they don't know what they're doing, or rather they don't have a lot of experience at it and they're just a little bit heavy-handed. And it may not break the socket, it may not damage it to a point where, you know, a CPU won't work, but you can usually look in there and see thermal compound or some evidence that a CPU had gone in there. All right, let's back the camera off. It's a little too close now. Mike's Unboxing Reviews says coin cell batteries are named the same way M.2 drives. The CR2032 battery, which is right there, he says that is 20 millimeters wide and 3.2 millimeters high. I never knew that. Look at that. I learned something new today. All right. Thanks for that quick tip from Mike's Unboxing and Reviews. Peter VZ with a €1 contribution. Thank you, Peter. All right. So I guess we can do our CPU socket frame. And let me see. What do I need for that? Everything I need for that should be in the box. All brand new, never opened before. There's the Allen wrench we're going to need for those torque screws that are holding the socket frame down. This will be our new socket frame here. And we've got 4 little pictures for instructions. That can go over there. So there's our socket frame. And our included Torx Allen. I guess it's not an Allen wrench, Torx wrench. Now these screws are not on very tight, and it's important that you try and put them back at the same level of tension, which is very, very close to being loose. As soon as they start to give resistance, you're going to stop. Best way I can tell you is to just use how it feels to try and return it. You don't have to be exactly, but you just want to be very close to how it was. And you want to tighten them in opposite corners equally so that there's no warping. This is an important thing, and you probably shouldn't be messing with it. This is a complete waste of time and money. I wasn't sure if they were a waste of time and money, unless you're an extreme overclocker using, liquid nitrogen to keep your CPU cool. You likely don't need this. It looks really great when it's on there, but once you put the heatsink on top, no one's going to see it anyway. As a nerd that I am, I like taking these sockets off because I never had any reason to before, but I'm a little fascinated by it. Now, it helps if we put the CPU in first, because when this goes down, the CPU needs to be down because this frame is going to hold the CPU in. So the CPU needs to be in first. Then we can take the frame off. So let me get the CPU out of its box. Once again, let's go back to camera one here just for a moment. You can see a better angle, I think, of this. You'll notice one side of the box has a piece of tape, and the other side of the box has all your warranty information here. So don't cut this side if you can. You're given a choice here, and I'm going to suggest you take what should be obvious side to open. There's our CPU, 14500, not a K. This is where the value is. Stay away from those K processors unless there are occasions where they're on sale, but you're going to have to provide your own heatsink versus this comes with a heatsink, which is more than adequate to keep this cool when it's running at the Intel recommended voltage, PL1, power level 1, power level 2 settings. That fan is more than enough. Now, given the case we're using is really a showpiece, that fan may not be flashy enough aesthetically. Technically, it's adequate for doing the job of cooling, but it doesn't do a very good job of looking pretty. It's not ugly. There's no RGB on it. So we don't even know that this board works, and I'm not going to be hooking up a liquid cooler or fancy cooler until I put it in the case and see what it looks like. I definitely won't be putting a liquid cooler on this. It's a waste of money from my perspective. This chip absolutely doesn't benefit from that. And I believe the tubes and the wires to the liquid cooler defeat the whole point of this case. So even though Thermaltake's marketing pictures show this case with a liquid cooler, I think it detracts from the beauty of the case. If you need a liquid cooler, that's one thing. If you don't need it and you're buying it for the aesthetic, I think this is the opposite. I think this putting a liquid cooler in this case takes away from its aesthetic, in my personal opinion. So we're going to stick with an air cooler one way or another. The question is whether or not we go with like the Intel, what's it called, Lumina RGB cooler, or just leave that one alone. We'll just see what it looks like and go from there. So I'm going to go ahead and start putting my CPU seated and get it socketed in there. We're going to go back over to our close-up camera here. And we'll open the lever up. Yeah, that CPU socket looks untouched, thankfully. And we're going to go over to CPU here. And usually you see the facing of the writing, how it all faces this way. So the writing on the CPU should face the same direction. Now, yeah, you can go with a little triangle and all this other stuff, or you can just kind of use common sense. And you can also see there's little notches, very, very small notches at one edge and the other edge that are offset. They're not exactly in line. And you can look closely at the CPU socket to see the little nubs. That can also guide you. Plus, there's the triangle that everybody and their mother talks about, which is nearly impossible to see. The writing, unless it's a mini ITX board, the writing will usually always flow in towards the bottom of the board. So all this writing down here, most of the writing's going this way. The only exception is right here where it's sideways. But in general, that's a little trick from your Uncle Carey. If you want to, if more efficiently socket your CPU correctly the first time. It was easy for me to say. All right, now, trying to remember how I did this before so that the plate from the bottom didn't drop out on me. How did I do that before? I don't remember. I think I need to put something under the board to support the plate. That'll make my life easier. Let's just go with this cardboard box. And let's place it underneath the CPU. There's a metal plate, which I cannot tip the board over now with the CPU in there. There's a metal plate that this screws into. And when I remove these 4 screws, that metal plate's going to drop down. So I'm just putting something under that plate so that I don't have to use my other hand to hold the plate in place, because that's a pain in the butt. Just trying to work smarter, not harder. Now I want to really feel and judge the tension of these screws. This is snapped on there pretty tight, but watch, just a little bit of tension. That's it. So it was like whoever tightened these, whatever the torque spec is, I can't tell you specifically the measure, but as soon as that screw came to a stop, they stopped. So it's relatively loose on there. You just break it free with 1/8 of a turn, and it just comes right on out. Now, when you're removing the screws, it doesn't matter what order you remove them in unless it's a thread ripper, and those are marked as 1, 2, and 3, and you take them off as 3, 2, and 1. And every other chip, it doesn't matter. This is half of our CPU socket frame, and I'm going to reuse one of the bags the replacement socket frame came in case the owner of this PC wants to put it back the way it was. It's not like we have any other use for these, so we'll just save those and put them in the motherboard box when we're done. Now, we're going to this part. Once again, try and be present and mindful of what these screws feel like when you're loosening them, so you have an idea of how far to tighten them, because you're not going to tighten them very far. Not stress this enough. This is a critical component to the ability of your CPU to be cooled properly, and you don't want to keep it too loose or too tight, nor do you want any of the screws tighter. You want them all equal all the way around. Oh, I'm going to need those screws, aren't I? You notice our CPU socket frame did not come with screws, and that's because it wants us to reuse the screws we already have. Remembering the rule of all the writing going the same way, you still have the triangle, of course, but this is just another way you can tell. And that's just going to sit right on top. We're not putting any thermal compound or anything on. Not yet. We're going to take the screws out of the socket frame we just removed, and we can just set them in there for now. What is the point of the CPU contact frame? Great question. As far as I can tell, it doesn't have a point. It's all philosophy and concept, but I haven't really seen anybody prove that concept. So at this point, for me, it's because I've already got one in inventory. I thought I would try the theory to see if it makes any cooling difference. It does not seem to, but maybe if you're an extreme overclocker using liquid nitrogen or massively overvolting the CPU, this might help keep this rectangular shape from bending in the middle. If it does bend in the middle, which an AM5 CPU wouldn't do because it's square, they make these for AM5 just the same. The reason they make them is to get $10 out of your pocket. That's, as far as I can tell, the purpose behind it is just for money. It doesn't seem to hold any other purpose. It's a placebo that makes people feel good. I think they look cool. And again, when you put the heatsink on it, you're never going to see it. So the whole thing is just a waste of money unless you're an extreme overclocker. And if you're an extreme overclocker, you waste money anyway, from my perspective. So we're going to wind these screws backwards a little bit, and they should fall into place, or you should hear a click. I heard that. Heard that one. Heard that one. Remember, I'm winding them backwards, listening for a... There it goes. So now they're seated properly into the threaded hole beneath. So now we can give them a couple of turns, doing opposite corners. And it doesn't matter if you tighten them all the same at this point because they're all loose. So as soon as you start to feel any little bit of tension, that's where you need to stop and back it off a little bit. As soon as I start to feel tension, I'm backing it off because I want these all to be level and equal. So it's not like you got to go 2 turns here, 2 turns there. When they're completely loose, that's just dumb. It's people following ritual and not really understanding engineering or mechanical engineering. So what we want to do is we want all these screws to be at the same or as close as we can get by feel, same level of torque they were at when we removed them. And in order to prevent one side from sticking up higher than the other side, we do opposite corners. It doesn't matter where you start, just always go to the opposite side for the same level of torque. So what we do is, again, I'll back it off a little bit more, and I'm going to start here. And as soon as I feel tension, I stop. I'll back this one off a little bit. Feel a little tension, stop. A little tension, stop. A little tension, stop. Now we should be able to tighten this down. Let's see how far it goes. That's it. Just an 1/8 to 1/4 turn. As soon as it feels like it doesn't want to go anymore, stop. That's it. That's approximately the same level of tension in my feel. What I feel is close to what it was. Now, this matters more if you're overclocking and you're an extreme enthusiast with a big budget, lots of money to spend, and a lot of time on your hands. As long as you're anywhere in the ballpark, that's good enough. You don't have to be paranoid about putting it back precisely. You don't want it too loose. And if you over tighten it a little bit, you're going to be okay. It's just, it could cause bending of the frame, which then could relate to your heatsink not being 100%. However, you don't necessarily need to be at 100% coverage. That's ideal and it's preferred, but you're never going to know. Ignorance is bliss. There's no way to know how much coverage you've got unless your CPU is overheating. You probably got it right. So if you've got a messy room and there's crap all over the floor and you clean up 99.9%, but somebody rubs their finger and says, "Oh, you missed a spot," who cares? It's 99.9% better than it was. So for anybody to worry about that 0.01%, they make medication to help them, okay? That's all I'm saying. It's ridiculous. You don't need to be at that level. If you want to drive yourself crazy like that, don't let me get in your way. But for the rest of you, please don't put yourself through that. It's unnecessary. I'm going to take that Torx Allen wrench deal and I'm going to put that back in this bag. This is going to go in the motherboard box in case the owner of the computer wants to put it back the way. CPU's installed. NVMe is installed. We can do the RAM. Now here on the board, it's going to tell us which RAM sockets to use first. There's usually a little drawing somewhere. It's right there. And it's very difficult for you to see, and my camera cannot zoom in close enough, but maybe I can bring the... Where am I going? Right there. It says DDR1, 2, 3, 4, and it shows a line connecting 2 of them. It'll also be in your manual, and you can pull up the PDF online. And this diagram shows we're going to use the socket closest to the edge of the board, skip one, and then do the next one, which is pretty much how they all are, but I just like to verify that. Larry G is a member for 25 months. Renews his membership, says always great to watch a build from Uncle Carey. Thank you, Larry. I always seem to learn something and it never gets old. Well, I appreciate that, Larry. Thank you. Mark N mentions the CPU frame may help with any spillage of the thermal material, but if you follow the way I apply it, you would never have that problem to begin with. But that's okay. Let me take that box out. This is the metal plate I was trying to hold. I didn't want it to fall. Depending on what's back here on the board, it's possible. And this looks like ASRock is supporting their external monitor here. I think that's what that is, which we've showcased. This piece right here is what I'm talking about, which we've showcased that external monitor that goes inside of a glass case. So it looks like there's a monitor on the side panel when you look at the live mixer build we did. And that looks like that's what that is. Although trying to find those monitors for sale, I don't know if they stopped making them, but they're very difficult to find now. I don't know how practical it is to have a 14-inch screen. I think it's 14 or 12-inch color LCD monitor on the inside of your glass panel, but you can if you want to. There's lots of ways for them to get you to part with your money. Whether or not it makes any sense or is beneficial, they don't care. They just want your money. Okay? That's why they make it. Most of the stuff is made for one reason, to get your money. If you think it's worth it, that's up to you. Larry G with a super chat of 20 bucks. Right on. Thank you, Larry. Thank you again. Raymond wants to know, can this CPU be undervolted? I don't know and I don't care. I don't advise you to try to outsmart the Intel engineers, with many of which with very, very well respectable college degrees from everywhere from Harvard to MIT. I would strongly recommend you do not try to outsmart the engineers. And if you think you can, you should apply for a job at Intel. That should humble you very quickly. At the end of the day, it's your equipment, and what you choose to do to it is yours. You can hit it with a hammer, drive over it with the car, throw it off the roof of a building. If that makes it go faster, I'll stand out of your way. But for the rest of you, if you want your system to be reliable and you want it to last a long time and be trouble-free, do not try to outsmart the engineers. This is not experimental equipment. This is not research and development. This is consumer-based equipment, which is very, very reliable and very, very robust. For you to try and do anything more to it, you are not messing with experimental equipment here. This is consumer grade equipment. I want you to really understand the difference. Consumer grade equipment isn't going to give you much benefit. If you think a 3% difference in performance is important to you, you should probably not be buying consumer grade equipment. You should be in a lab at MIT if that's your thing. Now, home labbers and hobbyists are going to do what they're going to do. This isn't like putting an amplifier on your ham radio or your CB radio. There's not much you can do to this that's going to get you much difference in performance unless you think 3% is a lot. If that's the case, I can't really have a practical discussion with you. So those kind of questions aren't for somebody like me. I would never do that to a customer. I would never advise a customer to do it. If you want a reliable system that lasts a very long time, where you're not degrading your chip or your reliability, leave it the way the engineers designed it. They are extraordinarily well educated, and there's a committee of them. It's not just one deciding. It is an entire group of well-educated engineers, as well as amazing testing for durability, reliability, and performance and power consumption. If you think you can outsmart this group of engineers, I cannot help you. I don't know what else to say. But you might find that fun. I find it frustrating. I don't like service calls that are completely self-inflicted, voluntary, and unnecessary. But I'm not telling you not to. And Peter with another €1 contribution. Thank you again, Peter. Okay, so we're going to put the RAM in, put the heatsink on. We're just going to snap that heatsink on. I suppose we can just put the heatsink on right now. There's already thermal compound applied. Intel has already applied it correctly, so we don't have to use my Carey method. It's an attractive cooler. It just doesn't have any RGB. And you'll see thermal compound is already applied. Do not add any thermal compound to this. Don't mix and match different brands. And there is exactly the right amount. You cannot do better than this. This has been engineerically and scientifically tested and applied so that you're getting exactly the right amount that will spread exactly the right way. You will never do a better job than this. and any thermal compound you replace it with will not work any better than this. You'll spend more for it, and you'll have the placebo effect that you will believe it, but it's simply not true. Furthermore, there is a very cheap thermal compound underneath this heat shield, which a lot of people don't consider. If you pull this heat shield off, which could break the CPU, you're going to find a sloppy mess of terrible thermal compound under there. So the idea that people focus on this without focusing on the other doesn't make any sense to me. It's illogical. I think it's ignorance. They just don't know. And so they think they're improving by changing it here, but they don't know enough to change it here. So the benefit of it, if there is any, is mostly in your mind. But again, they want you to part with your money. That's the goal here. And if you want to part with it, well, you know what they say about a fool and his money. Now, I'm not going to call you a fool. If you find happiness in that, placebo or not, I want you to be happy. If that makes you happy, don't let me get in your way of your happiness. As a practical service technician, I won't sell my customers things they don't need. I refuse. If the customer insists on it, I'll tell them my opinion. And if they still want to do it after hearing me, I'm happy to do it. But I'm going to set my customers' expectations before I accept their money or do the work. All right, so we just seat that down with the cable closest to where our CPU header is, right over here. And we can start in any corner. You'll hear it click. Opposite corner. Come on. There it goes. Got to put a lot of weight on this. Listen for the click. If it's not clicking, it could be because you've got the tower rotated in the unlock position. And then this will go right where it says CPU fan, fan 1 in this case, the one closest to the CPU. And we want to run the cable close to this header. We don't want to have to wrap it around or potentially have it get caught up in the fan and shipping or moving it around from, say, Studio B to Studio C or from one room to another. That's going to be a bad day. So we want the cable to run to look pretty so we don't really see it, and also to avoid getting caught up in the fan. But the cooler will work in any of the 4 directions. We can rotate this 90 degrees. It will cool exactly the same. Now for the RAM, we just put a couple of RAM sticks in it. We can put our power supply in there. And then we're good to go. We're ready for a power on self-test. Dave E pops in and says, hello, good to see you, Dave E. And we're going to go back over to cam 1. Dave Price mentions liquid metal. So liquid metal has a lot of conditions in order for it to work properly. Again, we talk about placebo effect. Liquid metal, when applied by a human and not by a machine, will not ever be applied correctly. Secondly, it will oxidize. So after a couple of years, your liquid metal is going to be worse than just standard thermal material. When we deal with any factory-built machines that have liquid metal involved, they will tell you, they will warn you, do not break the seal between the heatsink and the CPU, or you will ruin the application of liquid metal and it will no longer be effective and it will oxidize. It is applied precisely by a machine. No human being can do it correctly, and any benefit you see from liquid metal is strictly temporary because it will oxidize. So if you want to spend your money and it makes you feel happy, don't let me get in your way. If you want to be practical and you want to do things once and not have to do them again, stay away from liquid coolers, stay away from liquid metals, stay away from these contact frames. It's all a way to separate you from your money unless you're an extreme enthusiast who doesn't care about such things as money, and you don't care about having to go back and redo things because they wear out too soon. That's your choice, and you're welcome to make whatever choice you want. I want you to make an informed decision because in my experience, what I'm seeing on YouTube is everybody's talking about the pros, nobody's talking about the cons. There is no one upside on anything. The question you should be asking yourself when somebody says this is better, the thing you need to ask is at what cost? And I don't just mean the financial cost, because they're always going to charge you more for it because that helps convince you it's better. If I tell you liquid metal is better and I charge you less for it than the cheapest thermal compound, your human brain says that can't be. If that's better, it must cost more. So they're going to charge you more to imply the value of this. Then when they show you the results and you see that it runs cooler, come back in a year or two. And let's take another look at that liquid metal and see how it's oxidized, and then compare it with the cheaper thermal compound that's still running exactly the same 2 years later. Now, as long as you're okay with those terms and conditions, proceed. But if you didn't know any of those conditions and consequences, there's conditions and consequences to everything that there are pros. If there are pros, there are cons every single time. And it's up to you and your particular values to determine if you're willing to accept that. When we go with the engineering standards from the manufacturers, this is what's determined to be best for longevity, security, and performance for that CPU, this motherboard. All the engineers have had their say in committees to come up with what is the universal best for everyone, not for you. They don't know you. So if you want to do that, knock yourself out. But if you want a machine that's going to last 10 years and likely not have any problems, don't try and outsmart the engineers. Don't waste your money on parts you don't need. It's ridiculous, this obsession with heat online. You know how many computers I fixed from customers, computers that were actually running hot in 30 plus years of doing this? Take a guess. It is a strange phenomenon of this obsession with CPU heat on the internet. It makes no sense, and it does not follow any reality I'm familiar with. Except recently with the 13th and 14th gen motherboards that were overvolting the chips. Until then, I'd see once every 5 or 6 years a computer with a heat problem. This is very strange behavior. It does not match the reality of being a computer service tech. You're just obsessing about things that don't matter. And you're allowed to. But it's like an infectious disease that when you didn't know about it, you didn't care. And then once people start finding out, they start looking and they start thinking they have a problem when they don't. And the problem they have is they think they have a problem. And if they could solve the problem of believing they have a problem, they wouldn't have a problem to solve. Does that make any sense? You might be trying to solve a problem that only exists in your mind. And when you solve it there, you solve it out here. Okay, for some reason, this RAM kind of became unseated. It should be okay. Okay, let's seat the RAM. Whoops. Back over to the close-up camera. And we're going to put one here. Where's that going to go? This way? Usually this sticker on the RAM usually goes towards the CPU heatsink. Thumbs. Notice I'm not forcing anything. Everything should glide in without resistance. Ooh, that heatsink just moved on me. Feels like that screw right there might be loose. It's not a screw. It was dislodged in the package here. It was kind of sitting up. It should have been flat. So I think the shipping on this was a little rough. It's under warranty and it's probably fine. There's no movable parts here. So I'm pretty confident there's no damage. But we'll find out for sure here in just a minute. And we'll put the socket frame back in the box. Let's go back over to camera 1 again. Here, all the documentation and spare parts will go in the box, including any spare case screws, so that the customer just gets the computer and this motherboard box for any future upgrade or repair work they might need in the years ahead. Keep it all together. Doesn't have to look pretty as long as it's all locatable if we need it. It is hot. I can't even imagine what it must feel like outside right now. My phone says 109, and it's still climbing. We will get to 115 today. That is rough. Okay. Ron Barnish sends an Amazon gift card of, let me get my glasses, of $10. Thank you, Ron. He goes, here's for some paint at Studio C. Yeah, well, right on time. We just had to buy some more paint. Thank you for that. Okay, and then, oh, I wanted to put that little standoff in a bag. Little bag. Perfect. That'll be a perfect little bag for that. Just want to put this away before I forget. I don't have to worry about losing it. So over here by the side of the bench on the floor, I keep a power supply for testing. For some reason, I have a really nice NZXT power supply, I guess just to reduce all the cabling. It's probably what I was thinking when I did that. These will wind up in a build at some point. I rotate them around. We have a 1 and a 2. We only need to use 1 unless you're overclocking and you need to deliver more voltage to your CPU. This is not a K CPU. If your power supply does have the extra EPS connector, it's safe to use it, even if you're not utilizing it. This power supply does come with another one of these cables, but we don't need it. And we're not going to use this power supply on the final build. We step around, and I want to turn my overhead camera off because it's on battery right now, just in case we need it again. I don't want the battery to be dead on me. So bear with me for just a second while I power this off. Then we'll move it out of the camera shot here in just a minute, just to preserve that battery. And then let's get the HDMI cable hooked up here, as well as keyboard and mouse, and power to the power supply. We're going to leave the network cable disconnected. So here's our HDMI. We're going to go right here. We're not hooking up to Wi-Fi or network on our first boot, or even until after Windows is finished installing, because I don't want it to force me into a Microsoft account. Again, there's no point in me logging into a Microsoft account on a computer that's not mine. Okay, so there's that. I need the keyboard and mouse. I need a power connector, power switch. Keyboard and mouse. USB Wi-Fi dongle, or a wireless dongle for both the keyboard and the mouse will go there. Or switch. Apparently I am getting a delivery. That is the United States Postal Service. Oh, I think I know what that is. Hold on a second. I don't want that to sit out in 115-degree weather. So let me just go grab it before we continue. Okay, my apologies. Like I said, I don't like having stuff sit out there in that hot weather. This time of year, you don't want to order anything chocolate or gummy bears, because all you're going to get in the mail is a blob. Bear with me for just one second. Aha. I really like the Intel Luminar coolers. And I looked to see if anybody was selling on eBay just the cooler, because a lot of people that will buy the 14900 or 12900 or 13900 might be choosing a liquid cooler. And then they don't want this. And this is all RGB. This is a really nice stock Intel cooler that's included on 12th, 13th, and 14th generation high-end chips. It is beautiful. It's very effective. And I found somebody on eBay that was selling them for 30 bucks a piece. So I bought the 3 that they had. And you can see they haven't been used, but the heat outside and the packing material have touched the thermal compound. It's probably still okay, but I probably won't use that because it's been contaminated. But we might end up using this cooler on this build, depending on what it looks like. But that's exactly what that package was that was just delivered. I've got 3 of these now as spares. And they're overkill for a 14500 or pretty much anything less than a 900. They're overkill for, but they're going to look beautiful and provide that RGB. And they're very cost effective, or at least this seller was on eBay. I think the seller had 4. They sold 1. They had 3 left. I said, give me your last 3. And that was probably about 10 days ago. So I kind of forgot about them. Okay, here's my little power switch. I get these on Amazon all day. It's just a power switch with an LED. You don't have to hook up the LED if you don't want to. And the switch is the one with the single connector, and the LED has the positive and negative separated. I keep them separated. And then we'll put that right there, should be where it goes, I believe. We need power to the power supply. And we'll flip the switch on. I think, oh, we got some RGB happening underneath the heatsink of the M.2 here. That's a little distracting. But again, I think in the Tower 300, it's going to look good. I could be wrong. Having my power switch hang off the edge of the desk, probably not too smart. Ben Laird said 115 degrees Fahrenheit is 46 degrees Celsius. Man, I wish it was 46 degrees Celsius. It's a lower number. 46 is lower than 115. It's just a stupid joke. How many slices do you want your pizza cut into, 4 or 8? You better make it 4. I'm not hungry enough to eat 8. Okay, let's go over to HDMI input. Let's put myself in a corner because that's where I belong. I think we all agree. Most of my teachers growing up did. Corner. And power. Fan is turning. First boot. Is it going to boot? I don't know. RGB just lit up on the RAM. No idea. First boot can take 90 seconds or as much as 5 to 6 minutes as it's training the RAM and identifying the CPU. That's perfectly normal. Because it's a brand new solid state drive, there's nothing to boot to, so it should just take us into the BIOS. There's nowhere else for it to go. And if we look at our BIOS version, it says 5.04. So I've got a flash drive here with what is labeled as a beta BIOS, which is supposed to put our Intel Power Level 1 and Power Level 2, PL1, PL2, back to Intel recommended specs. I don't know why it's a beta, but I definitely want my PL1 and PL2 settings factory defaulted. I should not have to manually set them. That's ultra nerdy and techie, and no consumer I've ever met, let me rephrase, very few consumers I've ever met know how to do that or what that means. So out of the box, that should what all motherboard manufacturers should be defaulting to. And anybody technical and knowledgeable enough to change it should change it to what they want it to be. Should not be the other way around. Okay, so with the USB drive plugged in, I've already copied that BIOS. I don't know what the version is. I don't care. I just want the latest one. I skip anything between. And we're going to go to, let me get rid of my camera because I can't see. Can't see so good without my glasses. All right, let's go to Instant Flash. Oh, thank goodness we turned camera 1 off. Please suspend BitLocker. Well, we don't have an operating system installed, so that's fine. Do you want to continue? Yes. This is the BIOS it finds, 9.03. This is the BIOS we have up in the top left, 5.04. We're going to update and skip 6, 7, and 8. We'll go right to 9. Did it not accept my click? There we go. Do you want to update UEFI to blah, blah, blah? Yes. Can ask me a third time? After pressing enter, the system will automatically reboot. Please wait for a few seconds and the BIOS update will continue. Okay, so do I have to click OK, or is this going to assume I read it fast enough? I think ASUS does that. I just want to give this a second to see if it moves on without my permission. I hate it when they do that on something so critical. This looks like it's waiting for my input. So thank you, ASRock, for showing me that courtesy and respect. So let's go ahead and click OK. And it'll reboot and start the BIOS flash process. Now, we've never seen a BIOS flash fail on this channel in over 16 years on this channel. Should you have a power outage, it could be a problem. I've only experienced a handful of power outages here in the Phoenix area, and it usually occurs during a storm. We don't get storms that often. So I don't feel any anxiety towards losing power. I haven't lost power here in Studio B for a long, long time. And the odds of it happening during the 5 or 6 minutes we need for this are, in my experience, highly unlikely. But if it makes you feel any better, if you want to plug it into an uninterruptible power supply with a battery backup, it's certainly a precaution. I don't think it's necessary for me in the area I live in. You will have to make that determination on your own. We do these live and we do these unscripted and unrehearsed. So if it fails or if we lose power, well, it's going to happen live on camera. There's no editing. There's no going back and fixing it in post-production. This is reality. This is authentic and this is genuine. And this is to set your expectations with regards to how long this takes and what the process is and the likelihood of failure. Given we've never seen one fail in 16, how long has it been? 16 years? Started this channel in 2008. All the people that are so nervous about it are still living in the past, in my opinion, when BIOS updates were sketchier. Today, they're pretty solid. Still, things can happen. But if you're not having any problems with your system, I'd say leave it alone. I put BIOS updates on so I don't need them in the future. Rather than wait for something to break and then fix it, whatever this BIOS update fixes will never break because it's been fixed in the BIOS. And therefore, the customer will never call me with that problem because I've already resolved it before it happened. So therefore, the customer will never have that problem. Also, it's a brand new build under warranty. So if the BIOS update should fail, it's not a big deal to send it back. However, if you're just doing it to do it, well, that's on you. I don't know that you'll see any benefit from it unless it's a critical security update or it's fixing the PL1 and PL2. This is pretty boring. BIOS updates are so stable now, it's like watching grass grow. So I wouldn't worry about this being exciting. It's one of the most boring, reliable processes apart from installing Windows. It's also very boring and I don't know, it always works. Very rarely do we see a Windows install fail, but we have seen Windows installs fail more often than we've seen a BIOS update fail in 16 years on this channel. And one of the reasons BIOS updates, one of the reasons Windows installs fail is bad RAM. I'm just looking through the chat to see if I've missed anything here. Rick Lake said he noticed that the date in the BIOS is set for tomorrow. Well, it isn't, though. It's set exactly right, Rick. The reason why you think it's set for tomorrow is because you don't live in Taiwan or China, where they are 12 or 14 hours ahead of us. That is exactly the right time for the manufacturing facility that built this board. And it's nothing we need to address. Windows will automatically fix the date for us during our install. Nothing to fix, nothing to see. And it is set absolutely 100% correct. That is a perception problem. Jose Lopez with a $2 super chat. Sorry, I'm late again. I had to work. Hey, work is good. All good. All right, let's keep scrolling through the chat. What else do we have? Mortant joins us and says hello. Raymond wants to know if you can reapply thermal compound on coolers. I wouldn't. I would put the thermal compound on the CPU, and that's only after cleaning any old thermal compound off the bottom of the cooler and the top of the CPU with isopropyl alcohol. I've got videos on how to do that here. We've got over 1,700 videos in the queue, and a quick search on YouTube will show you the proper way to do that, or at least the way I do it as a business. And running over 30 years in business, I must be doing something right because I'm not out of business yet. So take it or leave it, the information is there. But we generally apply thermal compound only to a CPU unless it's already pre-applied to the heatsink, in which case we don't put any on the CPU. Do not put it on both at the same time. It's too much thermal compound. What else do we have for questions? Okay, so now we're at BIOS version 9.03. Very boring process, very reliable, nothing to worry about. All the anxiety and nonsense you read online. They do, again, they make pills to help these people, and you can stay protected from that with knowledge. Knowledge is power. Knowledge is your N95 mask from getting that disease, and I wish you the best. Now, with that done, we'll go back to camera one here for a moment. Go back here. I don't know any other way. It might sound rude, but I don't know any other way to describe that obsession other than this anxiety is a form of a disease. And it's completely unnecessary, and it's 100% imaginary, and you would suffer needlessly, and I don't want you to suffer needlessly. If you're making a sacrifice for the betterment of a reward, it's a different story. But there's no reward in this nonsense. It's just unnecessary ways to part you from your money for no real measurable difference that makes any noticeable difference to most computer users. Only through benchmarks could you see a very minor potential improvement. And in many cases, that difference is the room temperature anyway, between when you tested it before and when you test it again. It falls within a variable of margin for error that makes the whole process negligible and pointless. Again, if you're an extreme overclocker and you have that kind of time and money, and 3% difference makes a world of difference to you, or 3 degrees Celsius makes a world of difference to you, you do not represent who these motherboards and parts are made for. Nor do you represent the logic and the care and concern of the majority of people who buy their own systems. Even the ones who build them don't care about such minute detail that makes little practical difference in the real world. And you're not doing anything wrong, but your passion that leads you to that level of technical minutia that is mostly not practical and imperceptible to daily use outside of benchmark numbers has an effect of poisoning the mind of those who think it actually matters. And I'm telling you, it doesn't, unless you're in that category. Most people are not. But decide for yourself. The more you know, the better decision you can make that suits you and your values. Now, with the BIOS update done, I can remove a flash drive. I'll grab my Windows 11 installer. Again, this will be the only bootable thing on the system, so I don't have to adjust the BIOS and tell it to boot to this. When the BIOS checks the system out upon power up. It says, what can I boot to? I've got an NVMe drive here without a format and without an operating system. I can't boot to it. There's nothing else attached. That's why we're not attaching any, if we're going to have a second NVMe or a third NVMe or a mechanical drive, save those all the way to the end. Do not hook up anything unnecessary during your build process, or your diagnostics going to be a nightmare, and you might install Windows on the wrong drive. So we're avoiding unnecessary work that could make diagnostics more complicated and time consuming by only plugging in the bare minimum of things that we need, nothing more, nothing less. No internet, no printer. We need a keyboard, a mouse, a monitor. That's it. Now, our Windows 11 drive. People often think they're saving time by doing everything at once. There's an expression, it's been around before I was even born, and I'm old. Haste makes waste. And if you don't know what haste is, it means you're rushing through something, trying to save time, and you're ending up having to go back and redo it 4 and 5 times, making it take, and I'm just not necessarily 4 or 5 times, but having to redo it, which automatically is taking you longer than just doing it right the first time, which might seem like it's taking longer, but it's actually going to take less overall. Your odds of success and the level of frustration you'll deal with will be minimized when you don't have as many components that can go wrong. Once we've assured that the components, that the bare necessity in our foundation all work correctly, then we can build on that one component at a time, turning the system on. One hard drive, make sure it works. Second hard drive, make sure it works. Third hard drive, make sure it works. Don't attach all 3 at the same time. If you want to, go ahead. You got more time on your hands than I do. Just saying, ask me how I know. Let's go back over to our HDMI input, and let's go ahead and, once again, we're going to reboot the machine. It's going to automatically detect the only bootable device is that flash drive. Give it just a minute here, and we're going to get our power on self-test, which I thought would already happen. And it should start our Windows 11 install automatically. Once Windows 11 finishes installing and I plug it into the internet and I go to Windows Update, our date and time are going to self-correct through the internet. That's why we don't mess with it. Too many people go in and change it by hand, and they fat finger it, they don't realize it, and then they actually cause problems. If you want to see what that happens and what that looks like, look up our year 3000 problem and the reason why it was so hard to diagnose, and why every single part in the computer was changed, including the motherboard, and it went back to the year 3000 because somebody fat fingered it unnecessarily instead of leaving it alone. And let's go back over to full screen over here. Okay, so it booted to our Windows 11 installer. We're going to click next. We always install Windows 11 the same, always, 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 always. No exceptions. Don't have a product key, we'll enter it later. When we do enter a product key, I will buy a Windows 10 Pro product key from VIP CDK Deals. It will act and function as a Windows 11 Pro product key. You do not have to install Windows 10 Pro. Windows 10 Pro product key is a few dollars less money than a Windows 11 Pro product key. So to save a couple of bucks, I buy a Windows 10 Pro product key, and I buy it from VIP CDK Deals, where they're genuine, they're authentic, and they're guaranteed, and they have excellent customer support. Next. Agree to the license agreement. Next. Custom, always custom. It only finds one drive. I don't have to worry about installing on the wrong drive. Next, it will now partition, format. It'll create multiple partitions, 4 of them, format them, and then copy over the files necessary for Windows 11 to install. These are the installer files. The install begins on the second boot. On the second boot, you no longer need the flash drive plugged in. You can leave it in or take it out, it won't matter. Everything it needs after the first boot is already on our formatted and partitioned NVMe drive. That's what it's doing right now. John Famlor says, would it be okay to allow the ASRock Auto Drive installer? You can if you want to. I don't think we're going to need it, but that's an individual decision for which the correct answer for you might be yes. and the correct answer for you might be no. There's no one universal, one size fits all answer for everyone. Your values and your determination regarding what's easier and more time consuming and more reliable is up to you to decide, no differently than what you want. If you and I go to a restaurant to eat, you're going to order what you want to eat. I'm going to order what I want to eat. Nobody's making the wrong decision unless you've ordered something you don't like or it wasn't what you expected. But that's on you. That's not on me. The amount of money it costs to develop these auto driver installers and keep them updated in the included bandwidth is costing these companies literally millions of dollars. And for anybody to turn their nose up at it, to me, it's like, I'll just shake my head. You have no concept of the amount of time, research, and development and labor that goes into these driver updaters from ASRock, from ASUS, to dismiss them as garbage, I think is a mistake of a lack of understanding the depth of the cost and the value of that. Try and develop your own driver auto installer. Let me know how long it takes. And then let me hear the feedback when you release it to the public telling you what you did is complete crap and damages their computer. How offended would you be at spending that time and money, give it away for free, and then have people insult you about it? I get a little bit tingled when I hear that, because what I hear is somebody who doesn't quite understand the value of that. Now, that's okay. I could hand you a gold coin and you could say, this gold coin is stupid. There's nowhere for me to spend it. Great, it's a gold coin. What the hell am I supposed to do with it? This is worthless to me. And to you, I say, you know what? Give it back. I'll keep it. So if you don't want to use the auto driver installer, maybe because you're more comfortable grabbing your drivers automatically on your manually by yourself, or maybe Windows Update provides you all the drivers. The newer your system is, the less likely Windows Update will provide the drivers. So the auto installer may be more useful to a newer system where those drivers aren't available, and to a user who wants to get all their drivers in one fell swoop instead of going to the manufacturer's website and downloading them. There's no right or wrong to that. And ultimately, you have to decide what's right for you, and it's yours. Please don't push that on anybody else. Encourage people to make a decision. Please don't impose your values onto other people under the assumption they share your values. You should assume they don't, in my opinion. Okay, so now we're back to our installer, United States. Yes. The mouse, I accidentally hit the button, that's why that moved. US, yes. Skip a secondary keyboard language. No internet. Continue with limited setup. User is usually what I put up here, unless this is going to someone specific. Leave the password field blank. I leave location setting on so I can get the date and time updated, and if I want to search for something close to my location, I can go into Google and say, find a Jack in a Box near me, because, I feel like having dysentery tomorrow. That's convenient because I'm used to doing that on my phone. Some people are privacy nuts, and most people who are privacy nuts are people you don't really care about. You have no interest in. It's just in their own mind that what they're doing is so important and everybody's watching them. Nobody's watching you. If you're a celebrity or a politician, if you're in the public eye, that's different. But you have obscurity through obscurity because nobody knows who you are. And this obsession with privacy, again, I do believe they make pills that can help you with that. Nobody cares. Unless you're committing a crime and you're trying to cover your tracks. If you want to be that privacy secure, disconnect from the grid, get rid of your cell phone, get rid of the internet, get rid of a computer, go live in a cabin in the woods, and you'll have all the privacy you want. And when you go missing, no one will know. If anything happens to you and you need help, no one will know. If that's how you want to live, if you really mean it, do that. If you want the technology, but you also want the privacy, you're not getting the full benefit of the technology, and you're also not as private as you think you are. So it's a delusion. It's all a delusion because your ISP knows everything where you're going. Your internet service provider, your cellular phone provider knows where your phone is. It doesn't matter if you turn it off. It's just inherent to the way the technology works. You can't have one without the other. If you don't want to accept that, don't use the technology if it's that important to you. There's no other way to guarantee that you're not being watched. And nobody really cares other than to sell you stuff. It's all automated. They're processing it through code, And the machine is just saying, hey, he went here and he went here, so let's throw a coupon up for this. It's all about separating you from your money. That's all it's about. They don't really care about you. They care about your money. That's all they care about. All right. Now, when we look at the device manager, we can see what drivers are needed. And I just plugged the internet in, so you'll see that the auto installer is for the drivers. You can choose yes or no. I'm going to choose yes because it's going to save me a lot of time. So I'm going to just choose continue, but we're going to look in the meantime at the device manager to see how many drivers are missing. We have quite a few. And some of them are going to be very vague. It may say unknown device. How do you know what driver that is? So I know, but most people don't. A lot of this will be resolved with the Intel chipset driver, but we're going to get that automatically here. And so rather than download and extract zip files, this is way more efficient. And you'll notice this is truly only drivers. Sometimes like Asus and others will try and throw like Norton antivirus or some other bloat trialware, but ASRock isn't doing that. They're genuinely only offering us the recommended drivers that are either missing or are newer versions than what were installed by the Windows installer. So I can select all of these and just go ahead and hit update. Now, my internet connection here is relatively slow. This will probably happen faster for you than it's going to happen for me. But none of these drivers are particularly large except for the Intel video driver built into our CPU. And that's true of all video drivers. The VGA driver is probably, if it's not a gig, it's probably 600, 700 megs. And if it's an NVIDIA card, it's probably a gig or close. But let me go back over to camera one here while we're waiting and see what other questions you've got, and I'll give you my straight up opinion on it. You don't have to agree with me, and I don't require your approval. I'm just sharing with you as a business owner, as if you were a customer paying me, this is what I would tell you. Hey, there's Mitch Morrison joining us in the chat. Welcome in, Mitch. Bloviator Maximus says you refer to projecting the value in that updater utility and reduced customer service costs. This is true. And the cost is included in the price of the board. This is true. Yes, all of that, I completely agree with you. Mitch Morrison says it's Africa hot here in Phoenix. What movie was that? I know it was Ferris, Matthew. They say the heat makes it hard to find words. So yeah, we'll go with that as the excuse. Biloxi Blues, says Frank Jimmy. That's it. And it's Matthew. Come on. Broderick. Ole Peterson's got it. Matthew Broderick. I just think Ferris Bueller. He'll always be Ferris Bueller to me. Save Ferris. Mike's Unboxing Reviews and How-To says ASRock really nailed the driver updater software. I agree with you, Mike. You don't have to use it, though. And Asus will still try to get you that Norton and antivirus, which never fully uninstalls right. Best to never have it on your system to begin with, in my opinion. The best piece of software Symantec makes, and I mean the most solid, best value, most reliable piece of software, is the Norton uninstaller that's free. And that's no joke. I sincerely mean that is the best written piece of software they've ever created. I hope you never need it. Even if you use the uninstaller, the regular uninstaller, by going into your apps of your control panel and uninstalling the Norton, it leaves all this detritus behind in your system folders as well as your registry. Even though it says it uninstalled correctly, you still want to use the free Symantec uninstaller. After a reboot, run it again. run the separate uninstaller, and it'll take all the detritus. It doesn't take all the detritus out. It takes out a lot of it. I think you'll be shocked at how much is left over. It'll never be clean again. So just best not to put it on your system. It just gets into everything on your system and it never fully removes itself. Both Norton and McAfee, they're like a spider or a centipede with 1,000 legs, a millipede, and they get into the registry, system folder, user folder, app data folder. Oh, it's a mess. It's a mess, and it never fully comes out. It leaves scars. Super 33 says Norton has always been crap. They have just good market. No, if you work as an IT professional and you're doing administration in a corporate building with 1,000 computers, I mean, do you have any idea how many people Ford Motor Company has employed right now? Or how many people Intel has employed right now? You need a good antivirus that has a central point of operation, deployment, and management. And Norton does that very, very well. As a home user who has no experience in real corporate IT work, you won't see the value in it, but it's really not designed for consumers. Yeah, it used to be, not so much anymore. But today in the corporate IT business administration world, you would have a very different attitude towards it. Paul Garrett says War Games. Oh, with Matthew Broderick. Yeah, and what, Ali Sheedy too, right? Let's go back over to the computer and see how it's doing. I think it went to sleep on me. Right click, go to full screen. Okay, we're just at the 2-hour mark, which is where I like to keep these videos, a little over that. So I think we're going to finish this, do a reboot. We'll check the device manager, make sure that all of our drivers are now in place. And then I'll start all the Windows updates. We don't need to stare at that. It's like watching grass grow. Next Friday, the plan is to have Mitch Morrison join us. Everything's looking good on this board. Again, it was a returned board. I don't recommend, if you're inexperienced, that you buy any returned product. It will require potentially more technical knowledge, and your likelihood for a return is much higher. So if you're in a hurry and you're anxious and you want to build your machine and you don't want to deal with problems, do not buy returned products. If you're a technical person and you don't mind potentially delaying your build by a week or two because you have to send something back, make sure you buy from Amazon Warehouse so that you know the return policy is 30 days and it's free and you can return for any reason. Otherwise, just spend a couple extra dollars. It's not a lot of savings to buy a return board to make it worth all that hassle. That's how we found the Y3K problem that I mentioned earlier, was the customer bought everything new but the motherboard. The customer replaced everything. Every single, the case, the power supply, the motherboard, and the Y3K problem continued. What a tangled mess. All because they bought a used board trying to save $10. $10 and delayed their build by almost a month. And we had to figure this out. And it took a long time to figure this out. And I'm glad for the experience. And I'm glad to have been part of someone who discovered that and brought it to the media's attention. But it never should have happened. And if he would have just not been so cheap, sorry, but that's just being cheap, spent the 10 extra bucks for a brand new board, he would have built all of this on his own without requiring any help from me. And he'd have been up and running a month earlier without all the frustration and without a waste of time to save $10. On the other hand, the information we gleaned from that was priceless. To be able to identify what the problem was and make people aware of it. Nobody had ever seen that problem before. No one ever documented it, ever. So I'm grateful for the experience, but it was something that was completely unavoidable. It was something that was completely avoidable for $10. It's so stupid. The guy never built a computer before and he thought he was going to save $10 and buy a used product. Don't buy used products unless you're ready for that. And let's see, HDMI input. Let's go back and see how we're doing here. Still downloading. I guess I can go ahead and change the power saving features here while I'm thinking about it. Yeah, just to go to sleep on me, we'll set the monitor to go off, but we don't want the system to go to sleep. There's not running off batteries. That should be a laptop only setting, in my opinion. Unless you live in a country where electricity is really expensive. But then I'd say just shut the darn computer off. That'll save you more money. Retro Console wants to know, are the machines you've been building for businesses and personal people or gamers? Yes, I do all three, mostly for businesses, because one business can easily order 40, 50 computers for me in one go. Most customers in their lifetimes won't order more than 3 or 4. So at least since I started this business in the 90s, if you bought a computer from me in the 90s, you might have replaced it in the early 2000s, replaced it again in around 2010, maybe replaced it again in the last 4 or 5 years. There may only be 2 or 3 more left in your lifetime. So end consumers would be second, and then gamers would be last. Gamers, they want the best and they want to spend the least, and they're the most difficult people to please, and they want the most complicated systems, and they measure benchmarks instead of actual reality, and they want a nickel and dime. Generally speaking, nothing's ever good enough. They're never happy. Nothing's cheap enough. Nothing's fast enough, and I'd rather not deal with them personally. So I don't really build computers for gamers anymore, other than to say, I will build you a machine that you can use as a gaming computer, but it's on you to pick your video card, to source it and install it yourself. I'll make sure that the system will accept it and you'll have enough power, but it'll be on you to source it. Any problems you have with it, don't come to me. If you buy a graphics card and you have problems with drivers or a game playing, that's between you and the person you bought the graphics card from. I don't have time for that nonsense. I just don't have, if people want to pay for that, I'm happy to provide it, but they don't want to pay for it. They think that comes included with the price. It does not. I can't spend all day trying to figure out why this guy's frame rate's low on some game that no other customer plays and no other customer cares about, and I'm my only employee, and this person thinks it's a warranty issue, and every minute I spend with them, I can't charge for. And all the other customers waiting for me to take care of them with money in their hands have to wait longer. And if they wait too long, they'll take their business somewhere else, just as I would. So certain customers are good customers. Certain customers are just customers. And the level of service that I return to a customer is directly equivalent to the level of service I'm getting from the customer. Do they value my time? Are they thoughtful and considerate to what my time is worth? If so, there's no resentment and there's no problem. But the minute a customer thinks they're doing you a favor by buying from you, I don't want to deal with that customer. They can go shop somewhere else. This is an equivalent reciprocal arrangement where I benefit from the sale and they benefit from a good value with good support. If they want to offset that one way or the other, I don't want to do business with them. I don't need customers like that. Those customers will put you out of business. And that's not how I want to go out. So I'd rather say, I appreciate your consideration, but I think I would not be best suited for this job. And it's really me telling the customer, I don't think I'll make any money from you, and I think you're going to cost me money, and I'm not a charity. And then you're going to be resentful and angry, and I'm going to be pissed off. And if that's the way we're going to start this relationship, I don't want to start that relationship. I'm not about the money. I'm about the customer having their expectations met, and for me to be able to pay my rent at the end of the month. That's all I want. I'm not trying to gouge anybody, and I'm not expecting anybody to gouge me. And if I experience that, it'll mostly be from a gamer, statistically. I'm not saying they're all that way, but it's enough of a deterrent for me to sort of make that a lesser priority. Usually the systems sell for more, but I'm not making any more. So there's little incentive for me to do it and tolerate that. Now, if you have somebody who's very appreciative and grateful and appreciates the value of your time, and they're not going to nitpick everything and nickel and dime, I'm happy to do the work, and I'm happy to have them as a customer. But unfortunately, in the gaming realm, very few of them are that way in my experience. In business, you don't have to work that hard. I can build 3 computers for a business for the same cost and deal with 0 support and still make the same amount of money. Well, I can make 3 times the amount of money because each system has a certain profit. So if I build 3 systems, I make 3 times the profit. If that one system is a regular business machine or a gaming machine, nobody really appreciates the value of the labor, so I don't make any more on it. It's just the cost of parts. So the people selling the parts make money, The people shipping the computer make money. I make the same. So unless somebody wants to fork out the extra money as a gamer, and they usually don't, it doesn't make any sense to chase after that business for me. So most of my clients are business clients. They order computers much more often. They don't complain as much. They care about real problems, not benchmarks. And they order computers much more often in larger quantities. And that's how I have to stay in business. Okay, so Retro Console wants to know if I have any recommendation on a VPN. No, VPNs are a false sense of security. I don't recommend you use them. And the reason people use VPNs, I think, is often misguided, and they miss the point. If you do a YouTube search on why a VPN is a waste of money, there's a number of videos that will explain that. We don't have time to get into it today. We're right at the end of the video, but I wouldn't waste your money on a VPN. It's just going to slow your connection down and doesn't really offer any real security. In my experience, I would avoid it. There are some exceptions. People that travel using public Wi-Fi want to be on a VPN. Other than that, as far as privacy or security goes, it's all an illusion. Let's go back to, they just want your money. That's all they want. And let's go back to the desktop and see how our install. I just want to finish this. We'll reboot and then check the device manager, and then we'll wrap it up for today. So if you do have any final questions here at the end, I'm happy to address them. If they're sincere and technical, I'll do my best to provide a sincere and technical response. You want to joke around, and I'll give you joke around answers, and we can just sit here and blab and make up random words. That's pointless. But I appreciate you guys checking us out and hanging out with us today. And we do have a link in the video notes to all the parts. So if you want to take a look at the case and what it looks like, it's all there in the links below this video. We will have the case up on the counter next Friday. Assuming there's no problems with this board, the next step will be to put it into the case with the power supply. We're not using this power supply. And then we'll wire it up. We'll get a good look at it and see if that heatsink is going to be replaced with that bigger one I just showed you, that bigger Intel RGB. Haven't made up my mind yet. Thank you for all the contributions and support, and again for your kindness. I appreciate that. And if you're a member here, thank you for supporting the channel. Thank you again to Luke Greenio. And I missed a couple of gift cards, so let's shout out. Thank you to Charlie B with a $20 Amazon gift card. He says, happy birthday soon. Oh, thank you for reminding me. I'm going to be another year older. I guess that beats not getting another year older, but I appreciate it. Mortant with a $100 Amazon gift card says, hello again, Carey, Mara, and everyone in the chat. Here's $100 for more paint for Studio C. Thank you so much, Mortant. Very generous indeed. Barry Klein sent an Amazon gift card. He says, if I use your link to Amazon, do you get a kickback from a gift card? Not a gift card, but Amazon's also not taking any commission. So if you were to contribute through PayPal or to contribute through Super Chat, YouTube takes 30% of any Super Chat. PayPal takes 3% of any contribution. Amazon takes 0 out of your gift card, which is reward enough. So thank you, Barry, for the $25 Amazon gift card, because we're buying a lot of stuff for Studio C, everything from electrical outlets and switches and ceiling fans and paint and drywall and flooring and floor leveler and baseboards. It's like never ending. I'm even changing out door hinges. I don't like brass. I like brushed nickel. And every door's got 3. And you don't realize how many hinges you're using in your house until you have to replace them all. It's like 40 or 60. I can't remember. So all of that's going to get changed out and modernized. Ron Barnish, thank you for the $10 Amazon gift card as well. And again, $25 via PayPal from our friend Lou Greenia. And I just want to look in my super chats one more time and say thank you again for your support, your financial support, your kindness, your membership, your friendship. Peter VZ contributed a couple of contributions here in today's super chat, as did Jose Lopez, Larry G, PSC Computers Missouri. I missed that one earlier. Thank you for that. A $5 super chat. Alan Lindos with $27.77. These don't work from that distance. I don't know why I tried it. Made it worse. Thank you, Alan, for the contribution. David Graham, thank you. Roy Starman. Oh, I missed yours earlier. $10 from Roy Starman, also a member for 24 months. That rocks. Thank you so much. Ben Laird, thank you again. Tim TechWiz and David Graham again. William Denton, I think I missed that one earlier with $1.99. And Rick Lakes, thank you. Nick Caffrey and Mark Gaines, 3D Everything. And our first contribution was from Craig Casabona. A shout out to our friend Mike's Unboxing and Reviews, who has a very respectably sized tech YouTube channel. If you like my content, be sure and check his channel out. I think you'll enjoy his content. And if you're across the pond, if you're living there in UK looking for somebody local, there you go. Probably cheaper than flying me out. Garfield Rupe with a $2 super chat. Thank you for that, Garfield. All right, let me go back one more time, check on our progress. Should be about done, I think. I hope. Yes. All right, that says installation's been successfully completed. For further drivers and utilities, please enter BIOS setup. Oh, because once it runs once, it disables itself. So it only pops up that one time. So any future reboots, that auto driver installer is not going to offer itself anymore. If you want it to offer itself again, you got to go back in the BIOS, set it back to auto. When it runs again, it'll set itself back to disabled after that boot. So that way it doesn't get annoying. Thank you to our friends at Acronis and RoboForm for their continued support, as well as VIP CDK deals for discounts on legitimate, legal Windows and Office product keys that are all guaranteed. The links to save 30% on Acronis, 30% on RoboForm if you're a new RoboForm customer, and 30% on your Office and Windows keys are all in the video description below this video. We do make a small commission if you choose to buy, and we really just want to save you money. I don't want you to feel any pressure to buy anything. If you like it and you see the value in it, we're just trying to get you a 30% discount from what everybody else has to pay. That's it. Don't feel any pressure. I'm not a salesman here. I use these tools and I use them regardless of these companies supporting me. I don't find anything better than Acronis in that category. I've never found anything better than RoboForm as a password manager. And I've never found more reliable, guaranteed, legal, legitimate product keys from Windows and Microsoft Office than I have from VIP CDK deals. I'm sharing with you what I use, and you get a 30% discount. Try the products. They all have free trials. If you see what I see in them, you're going to see what a bargain that is. And if you don't, do us both a favor and don't buy it. You're not really helping me out. I'm trying to help you, okay? If you don't want the help, perfectly fine. I'm not buying a Tesla because you bought RoboForm. But I appreciate the support, and I hope you understand it's a reciprocal arrangement that I hope we both win from, as well as Acronis, RoboForm, and VIP. I need everybody to win equally here. They get the sale, you get a good deal, I make a tiny little commission, everybody's happy. And I'm not trying to just separate you from your money. And if I think there's a great product here, it has value. If you want something for free, don't expect any support or any help and few updates. And if that's how you want to live your life, have at it. I'm not saying all the free stuff is bad, but free comes at a different kind of cost, which is usually time. And if your time is worth nothing, then I guess it's truly free. It also makes you the customer. It makes you the payment. when something is free, you're the payment, whether that's through monitoring how you use it, or they give up, so you're giving up your email address or something they can sell to pay for the bandwidth and the development and the coders so that they can pay their rent. Nothing is really truly free. Anything you see that's free, you are the product. All right. Let's go back to, here we go. Let's check that device manager. We're half an hour over today, it looks like, by the time we end this. So a little bit long today, but that's okay. I've had a good time. I hope you have too. You guys have asked a lot of really great questions, and I appreciate that very much. Device manager is now 100% free of any issues with drivers. And I didn't have to install drivers one by one. The auto driver installer took care of that. Now, the Windows Updater is running in the background, which is why we have a red dot down here. It wants to update and probably wants to restart. I'll hit download and install all. And we'll turn this option on, and we'll go to advanced options. I'm going to turn this one on, and this one on. Now, whether or not these three optional updates are actually newer than what we just installed, they're usually Bluetooth, wireless, and network card drivers. So I'll grab them, and if they are older, they'll fail to install, and then they won't offer it to us again. If they do install, then they were likely newer. So we'll let that happen, and I'll go back over to camera one. Thank you again to Marlena. She's monitoring the chat. She takes care of most of the administrative work on the back end, from thumbnail creation, video descriptions, creating links, answering emails, and working with potential sponsors or companies that want to send us product to review. That's taking a massive amount of work off my shoulders so I can focus on the stuff we do in front of the camera, and she could focus on, and I don't know if you've ever done this before, but there's a lot of work that has to be done behind the camera. And as the channel grows, that gets magnified because the popularity increases the amount of correspondence we get. And if I spend more time on that than on the videos, then the videos start trending down and the correspondence goes away, and it's tough to find the middle. So to have Mara helping on that is incredibly beneficial for me to keep moving the channel forward and grow. And if you want to know more about Acronis or RoboForm, please use YouTube search, type in RoboForm space CareyHolzman or Acronis space CareyHolzman if you want to learn more about it. We have an entire 90 minutes dedicated to answering your questions. Mike's Unboxing says Carey's content is often similar to ours. He just has a lot more hair. It might be a toupee, a really bad toupee. And nobody's calling me Mr. Clean, so calling me other things I can't repeat on a family-friendly video. So you got that going for you. You don't have to deal with that. All right, I think that'll wrap it up. Thanks again. I'll see you all very, very soon. I don't know if I have a video this weekend. I've got a lot of work to do at Studio C. I don't want to do it in 115-degree weather, but we'll see. If time permits, I have a couple of other videos I need to make. They kind of sit in the queue for whenever I have time. We are always back on Mondays for members only. Being member is a little different than joining as a subscriber. There's a subscriber button and there's a join button. What the join button does is you paid $9.99 a month. YouTube takes 30% of it, but it helps us pay for all of this stuff that we use as content. As my thank you back to members, we do videos only for members that are never exposed to the public, which a much smaller turnout. It's more intimate and more informal. If that appeals to you and you want to show some love for the channel, so we're not having to chase down some corporate sponsorship, and I'm here talking to you about men's personal grooming products, you know what? I won't even do that. I won't make any videos. And if you're wondering, hey, Carey's not making videos very often anymore, it's likely because there aren't enough contributors to pay for the content. So I'll always make videos, but the frequency of the videos determines what our budget is that we can spend on buying product like this. And of course, what companies are willing to send us things for free, enabling us to review it honestly. A lot of companies aren't okay with that. When they're paying for a review, they want some assurance that it's not going to be critical of them. Well, that's not a review. That's a commercial, and I'm trying to avoid that. So far, with your support, we're 100% viewer supported. And if I offer a product here, it's because I use it myself and they value you to offer you a discount. Otherwise, we don't offer it, period. I'd like to keep it that way or just don't make videos. So our members are critical to maintaining this. And for that reason, they get content just for them. Every Friday, we do a video for the public. Without the members, those probably wouldn't happen either. But the public videos like today, every Friday at 1 o'clock Pacific time, members only videos every Monday at 1 o'clock Pacific time. As far as the other days of the week, it's as my schedule permits. It's never, so far, we haven't reached a point where we've run out of content. I still have a backlog. So if you're not seeing a video currently, it's just because I don't have time. When we're through the backlog, I'll let you know. Then I start to sweat a little bit. But so far, we've got plenty, at least till the end of this year. That'll wrap it up for me. Thank you again. I'll see you all very, very soon. Thank you for being a part of this amazing community. I love this community, and I just want to see it grow and expand to more kind, like-minded individuals. And I hope you found this both educational and a little entertaining and humorous. Until next time, bye for now. Look at that, right at the 2.5 hour mark. Perfect.